Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again and welcome to a very hot and smoky August day here in Alberta. And I have a question for you, and it's not do you lift, it's how do you lift. So when you need to get your car up off the ground to do some work on it, what do? What's your process? Do you have a whole stash of 2x4s hanging around like I do so you can roll your car onto them first because you need that ground clearance just to get a jack under it? And then where do you go from there? I know I tend to get a little bit lazy, and I know it's not the right thing and could even damage things possibly, but I'll take my jack and put it under the rear subframe of the wagon, pump up the whole rear end to get the rear end up so I can slide 2 jack stands under each of the pinch welds on the rear at the same time, because I'm trying to save time. You know, it takes so much time to get the car up off the ground. You haven't even started your project yet, and it's just a time suck. So then you do get under the car. Do you feel safe? You know, in this case, I have 2 different items holding up the car, and that's not uncommon for me. Sometimes I run out of jack stands, and I don't really feel totally safe all the time. Car's wobbling a little bit, and I recognize that my garage is quite flat, and yours might not be, so your situation might be even a little bit more dire than mine. And then, do you have enough room to work? You're laying on your back, your arms are, super sore, and you're working a couple inches in front of your face. Can you even get the job done? How much time do you think it costs you to do the work just because the car is too close to your face? You know what? There is a better way to do this. So if you guys watched my garage rebuild series, you'll know that one day I aspire to have a whole 2-post lift up in here, which is why I vaulted the whole ceiling and put footings in the ground. But for where I'm at in life right now, based on my budget and honestly just the type of work that I do on my cars, I don't need something like that right now. Although I'd love to have it, and a workbench and a tool chest, so Ben Pack, holler at me. But in the meantime, the better way to do this for me was to go to something like this, the QuickJack BL-5000SLX. For all intents and purposes, this is a lift, it's just not a post-based one. Really, it's just an electrically driven hydraulic pump that moves an arm on a steel frame system that lifts your car up off the ground. Probably about the same height as what a jack stand would be maxed out, just way faster and way safer. When you pick one of these sets up, you'll get 2 big boxes with the frames in it, and then a third holding the pump, big old instruction book, the hoses and all your fittings. But I went out and I bought a couple extra things too. So FYI, you don't get any ATF fluid with it, makes sense, but just so you know, when you get this, go pick up a couple bottles. And then I wanted to be really careful about my install, so I'm going above and beyond here, but I'll talk about that later. And then I splurged. One, because I really do care about my pinch welds, so I got QuickJack's own pinch weld blocks, which are going to be coming in handy when I lift up the cars. And because I don't want these things sitting on the ground, I got their beautiful wall hanger sets with this nice powder coated steel and rubberized hook. It's getting hot, it's a couple degrees cooler on the floor. I just want to talk about money really quickly before we get going. FYI, this is not sponsored content in any way. This is just a product that I wanted. To be fair, I actually wasn't in the market for a lift right now, but I saw that QuickJack USA in Canada was holding a sale, $250 off till the end of August of this year, 2021, on this model, the 5000 SLX, and I believe another one for light trucks and SUVs too. So that would have knocked it down to about $1,240 USD, which is not too bad. I was willing to pay for it. But as a Canadian, if I ordered it through the QuickJack website, I would have had to pay freight to Canada. And that's no bueno. That's expensive, and I pay $1.30 right now on every American dollar, and that's just too much money. So I wanted to go for it though. I knew as soon as I looked at the product I would get a lot of value out of it, and I found out that as a Canadian I can source this locally pretty much any time from NAPA Auto Parts, Canadian Tire, and in my case here, Part Source. So I went in there on a day where it was 15% off the entire store because it was some long weekend sale, and I'm pretty sure the manager just gave me a "we're tired of moving these boxes around, just get them out of here" discount, and I walked out of there with this thing for a clean 1,000 USD. I'm going to start working my way through the assembly here, and I'm not going to do a full DIY for you today. The instructions are good, very thorough. In fact, I'm doing this for the first time, and I'm just following QuickJack's own YouTube tutorial online. So I'm learning as I go, but I will stop and point out things that I'm going to do a little differently, or that didn't quite make sense on their end and I had to figure out in real life. And at the end of the day here, we're going to lift this wagon off the ground. Once you're all unpacked and you're starting the assembly, I've got one little deviation I'm doing here. One of the very first steps is to just pop off the cap from the hydraulic cylinder. And yes, there is shipping oil in here, and yes, there is an O-ring on the elbow you're installing, but all I'm doing is taking a little bit of my ATF fluid and coating the O-ring so it doesn't go in dry. One more little switch up here in the installation process. I'm actually jumping ahead a step so I can do it on the bench to make my life easier. But at this point, you would have already been asked to install this end of the short hoses onto that elbow fitting, then come back, take the Teflon tape that they provide, which I appreciate, and put it on the other male threads of the hose and use that to seal against your quick connect. Now what I'm going to do instead is use this. This is expensive, I'll admit, but it is really good stuff. Permatex 54540. This is the only product that they make specifically for metal threads on hydraulic lines. This is what's going to hold all that PSI in and actually provide you a lot of benefits that the tape isn't, which you can see right there in the middle row. So I'm going to apply this onto my threads and install both my quick connects here. One observation here as I just finished up putting the quick connects into the power unit. They can be torqued, but they don't so much as finish being torqued as they do just bottom out. Basically what I found is that you spin, 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 and then boom, they're just simply bottomed out on this plate right here. You can still apply a torque to it, but I found it a bit unnerving how quickly they just stopped spinning and with how little pressure I could bump them back to unthread. One other little surprise I thought I'd give you a heads up on to save you some money. Turns out that these are shipped with a little bit of hydraulic fluid in them. I did notice when I took off the valve here to fill it up that there was a little bit of yellow fluid in there. It's the same stuff that leaked out when I took out the shipping plugs and went to put in the quick connects, but I didn't really think anything of it. You know, I thought maybe I'd pour it out, but who cares? This is supposed to hold 2 liters or 2.1 quarts, and for me that would have been 2 full jugs and a little bit out of here. Nope, I didn't even make it through a full 2 here. So just buy yourself 2 quarts. I'm just about to get the bleeding process underway on the hydraulic cylinders, but I wanted to stop for a second and talk about the general quality of material and craftsmanship I've seen so far. I'm impressed. You know, when it comes to the threads, they're all sharp and hard. I haven't found a single piece of metal so far that has been crushed under my wrench. It's all really nice, tough steel. And these quick connects are like butter. Here, let me connect this last one with you and you'll see what I mean. If you're familiar with brass fittings like natural gas lines for a barbecue, you know sometimes you'll have to pull back on the quick connect super hard and try to jam it on there. Not the case. Look at this. Just push straight on. Beauty. Okay, the bleeding process is done, or at least to a point where I'm happy with it. It was actually a bit onerous, not because the process is tricky, but it took me about 3 times to stop getting air out of there. And this is where I'm at. So visually I'm trying to see that they rise at the same speed. Also, look how cool this pendant, as they call it, is. So up they go, and I'm listening for the point where each of them have their locking bars hit the first lock position at roughly the same time. 1, 2. So they're pretty close, and I think I'm happy with that. So now we get to test it out on a car. You know what was a little funky in hindsight though? That the original caps that were in the hydraulic shocks, they were 1/4 inch, but then our bleed screws here, turns out it was 4.5 mil. Who would have thunk it? Now before we give the wagon a lift here, I just wanted to talk about why I bought those pinch weld blocks. I felt they were necessary. So props to QuickJack for supplying these in the first place. So they do give you a full set of 4 of the 3-inch rubber blocks and a full set of the 2-inchers. But based on the fact that cars these days more or less have predefined jack points that are along the frame, and there's pinch welds because they're unibody, I'm not really sure how many people could actually use these. Maybe an old vehicle or I don't know what, lifting off of suspension. I honestly don't know what the right answer for these are. So I felt compelled to get these, and they are really nice. I just wish that the normal designs, at least maybe one of the 2, had the grooves already cut in it. QuickJack went above and beyond though when they included 2 handles. So obviously there's wheels on one end of this thing, so it slides this way pretty easily, but it's a little tricky to shove in and pull out. But they give you 2 huge steel hook handles, and they just go right over top, and you can use them to push and pull to maneuver your way in. It's hot, I'm hungry, but it's time to try this out. So before I hit the button here, I just want to say that it was actually a bit of a pain in the ass, I'll be honest. I had to run around, and it doesn't actually leave you a lot of room to shove your hand in here, because you have to be really careful that the pinch block is actually landing on the pinch weld. And there was still a lot of running around and laying on my side to make sure it lines up, but it's there. So here we go. This is the bona fide very first time it's going up. There we go. We'll just bring it to the first locking point and bring it back. There we go. Something interesting just happened, and might be a case for QuickJack to make the pinch weld blocks the 3-inch thick variety and not the 2 like it is. Check this out. Hopefully this translates, but on the left we have the pinch weld block, fully seated up in the pinch weld. You can see the pinch weld continues and there's a bit of a protective barrier on it too. But what's going on is that we're at a low point. So this bar right here goes all the way through and it's actually almost as high under the car as the top of this rail. And it's basically making contact with the pinch weld even though the car's sitting on a block. So which is why if this block was thicker, you'd actually avoid having this clearance problem. Let's forge ahead and push this to the second locking point and see how much distance we can actually get from the ground to the car. Oh, mama. We have arrived. There she be, up on the second locking position that's maxed out. I just took a measure, 17 inches from the floor to the bottom plane of the car. That's the lift that you get. And that's pretty good. That's higher than I would normally get the car when I'm putting it on jack stands, so I'm happy with that. You know, I am tall, so I'd always like a little bit extra reaching room. I just feel like I get kind of jammed up and my muscles get cramped. So maybe if there was a version that lifted it like 2 feet, but of the same size, and I'm talking about the length of the frame rails here, that might be kind of cool. So QuickJack, there's a free idea. But what I definitely noticed is how stable this thing is. Normally when I put up the car and give it the shake test, I get a little bit of wobble. None. I'm putting more weight on here than I ever normally would. This thing is not moving at all. So here's a really big test. How fast can we put it back down on the ground? Normally at this point I'd start running around with my jack and I would bring up the rear end, take out some jack stands, put some wood blocks down. Forget about that. Let's see what we can do here start to finish. So I'll bring it up a little bit so I can get the locking bars to go behind their first position. And how fast can we get down? My weight is hauling ass. Past the second lock, and we have 4 wheels on the ground right now. Wow. Success in my books. So I'm gonna call it for today, have a late dinner, and I'll come back tomorrow to install and test out those wall hangers. Day 2, much better temperature, and I'm pretty sure I found a good spot to hang these up. So I just want to give you another good look at these brackets here. You know what, by the way, I know you guys are asking about the S4. Let me give you a real quick peek what's going on. That's just a little bit of it. There's much more in the stash, but it's coming soon. Don't worry, there's some good things planned. Anyways, these brackets, they add some polish to the space. Yes, they're functional. They're gonna do a great job holding up the lifts, and they're made great. The laser cut logo is super cool, but what I love is that it just adds some polish and flair to the space. It just says, I care, I'm a car guy, I like this stuff. Look at my shop. So here's my spot that I picked, and I'm trying to do some future proofing here. My 30 amp, that's for the future lift. So knowing that there will be a post right about here, that'd be kind of cool to have like posts there, and then the QuickJack stands on the right of it. And basically what QuickJack wants you to do is find a stud. They've given you some galvanized, maybe like 2.5, 3-inch screws, and they want you to support those brackets with a stud because these things are heavy. They're about 80 pounds each, and they ask you if you can actually rest some of the weight on the ground so you're not actually holding it all up off of the floor. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna angle them out because I have a cement curb in here that kind of kicks out a little bit. So I'll lean them out a little and I'll mount these things up. Voila. It actually worked out pretty easily and it looks great. These things are held on there real sturdy. And I also just hung the hoses on here too, because I didn't totally account for the fact that there's more stuff to store. In fact, I kind of wish QuickJack made a bit of like a tote bag or something, because we still have the pump, the pendant, the handles, and all the rubber blocks. And it'd be kind of nice to just bundle that up and throw it under the bench or something like that. My final thoughts then. So overall, there's a lot of benefits to this product. It's super well built. I was impressed all the way through with every component I was working with. I love the height that you can move the car up to on the second locking position. It's definitely higher than you'd probably normally get on a jack stand, and I feel really safe under there. I was wiggling around trying to shake things, did not move at all, so that makes me feel really good. It also goes down super fast. I would say that's the biggest time saver that I noticed, because I do have to dock it 1 point, but only if you're using the pinch weld blocks. I found that the effort it took to line up those blocks so you could actually get the car moving upwards Actually took a lot of time. I think it almost took as much time as my old process of just rolling the car into blocks and then jacking it up and putting it on stands. But like I said, overall, the benefits absolutely outweigh that one little thing. That's the review. I hope this was helpful if you were already out in the market looking at the QuickJack and just wanted to learn more, or perhaps I highlighted a product out there that you didn't know about and could be an awesome addition to your garage too. Remember, there's only 2 weeks left till the end of August here to capitalize on that $250 off. And if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate if you liked this video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks as always. Catch you next time.